The early months of 1942 were extremely challenging for the U.S. Asiatic Fleet. Much smaller in size than the Pacific Fleet and composed mostly of outdated surface warships, the fleet was in no condition to stand a real chance against the Imperial Japanese Navy. Despite this, the fleet's position in the Philippines under Admiral Thomas S. E. Hart gave it a chance to interfere with Japan's push southward. Not long after the attack on Pearl Harbor, Japanese bombers destroyed the Cavite Navy Yard near Manila. American land-based air support, which was meant to help the fleet, had also been nearly wiped out. Most of Admiral Hart's surface ships escaped southward to the Netherlands East Indies after the main operations base was destroyed and the Philippines fell to Japanese forces. However, the situation did not improve once they arrived in Dutch waters. The Allies, struggling to hold their position, decided to unite their remaining naval forces in Southeast Asia. In February, ships from the United States, Britain, the Netherlands, and Australia were grouped together as a combined force called ABDA. Despite their efforts, they suffered heavy losses in 3 battles: the Battle of the Flores Sea on February 4, the Battle of the Bedouin Strait on February 19–20, and the Battle of the Java Sea on February 27. By March, Singapore had fallen under Japanese control. Most Allied surface forces had been destroyed, and U.S. ground troops were confined to a shrinking area in the Philippines. With no major force left to resist, Japanese troops advanced into the Netherlands East Indies. During these difficult first months of war in the Pacific, American submarines became the Asiatic fleet's only real offensive tool. The fleet's submarines included both modern fleet subs and older, smaller vessels. It began the war with 29 submarines, which had been training under wartime conditions for several weeks before the conflict officially started. After the fall of the Philippines, they had to operate with very limited support, as the Cavite raid had destroyed most spare parts and supplies. Submarine tenders, acting as mobile bases, kept them operational by moving from place to place, occasionally giving them a slight edge over Japanese forces. In December 1941, many American submarines were already patrolling waters near the Philippines. Their main task was to disrupt Japanese invasion fleets. After their early missions, most of the boats headed south and eventually set up operations in Australia. In early 1942, they carried out a variety of missions. Some were assigned to special duties near the American-held island of Corregidor, close to Manila Bay, while others worked to defend the Netherlands East Indies. Several submarines were lost during these operations. The Celian, Shark, and Perch were destroyed by enemy action, and the S-36 ran aground and had to be scuttled. Despite the losses, the submarines were credited with sinking 10 Japanese ships during this time. From the very start of the war in the Pacific, Lieutenant Commander Fred Wirtz and his submarine, Seawolf, SS-197, were deeply involved in the fighting. Wirtz had been aboard the Seawolf since he commissioned her at the Portsmouth Navy Yard in New Hampshire on December 1, 1939. Seawolf was the last of 4 Sargo-class submarines built, weighing 2,350 tons and measuring 311 feet long. She could travel at 20 knots on the surface and just under 9 knots underwater. A crew of about 55 officers and enlisted men manned the vessel, which carried 24 torpedoes, 4 in the bow and 4 in the stern. After missions in the Atlantic and Caribbean, the Seawolf joined the Pacific Fleet and was ordered to the Asiatic Fleet in the fall of 1940. She sailed to Manila and was docked there when the war began on December 8. The submarine quickly left harbor to avoid Japanese bombers spotted over Cavite just 2 days later. Despite attempting an attack on a Japanese ship near Apari on the northern coast of Luzon, Wirtz's first war patrol lasted 18 days and resulted in no confirmed hits. On December 31, Seawolf left the Philippines en route to Australia. During this journey, her second patrol, no enemy vessels were sighted. Her third war patrol was more unusual. On January 16, she left Darwin carrying 50 caliber machine gun ammunition bound for Corregidor. She passed a Japanese convoy on the way but couldn't attack due to bad weather. On January 27, she reached the island and quickly delivered her cargo. She then picked up 25 passengers, 16 torpedoes, and various spare parts for submarines. Rather than return to Australia, Wirtz chose to sail for Surabaya, Java. On February 15, Seawolf resurfaced after departing Surabaya and was guided past minefields by a patrol boat. By 5 p.m., she was traveling north at 17 knots on her fourth war patrol. Most of this patrol took place in the waters around Java, where American submarines again tried to block Japanese invasion forces. On February 19, near Bali's eastern coast, Seawolf fired torpedoes at 2 Japanese transport ships. Though none hit, she was hit back with heavy depth charges. On February 25, she spotted more Japanese vessels in the Bedouin Strait near Bali. Wirtz launched torpedoes at a destroyer and a transport ship. He believed he hit the transport and possibly the destroyer as well. However, post-war records revealed no Japanese ships were actually sunk in that attack. Despite Wirtz's skill and determination, his efforts had yet to yield major success. The American submarine force was unable to prevent the Japanese invasion of Java. In the final days of February, during the Battle of the Java Sea, Allied surface ships were almost completely destroyed. Soon after, Japanese troops landed on the island. Left in the area were 12 American submarines determined to disrupt Japanese shipping as much as possible. Seawolf and Pike, SS-173, were sent south of Java to look for Japanese carriers, but the enemy fleet avoided them. As their long patrol neared its end in late March, the Seawolf's crew began to feel the strain. Many hadn't seen daylight for weeks, tensions were high, and some sailors resorted to rolling coffee grounds in toilet paper to smoke when they ran out of cigarettes. Still, Wirtz and his crew remained committed to facing the enemy. Once again, the Japanese Imperial General Headquarters approved the operation to occupy Christmas Island on March 14, 1942. The island, located over 200 miles directly south of the western tip of Java in the Indian Ocean, was under British control and rich in phosphates, an essential resource for the Japanese war effort. Toward the end of March, a small Japanese fleet departed from Bantam Bay in Java, bound for Christmas Island. This fleet included 3 light cruisers, 8 destroyers, an oiler, and 2 transports carrying a total of 850 soldiers. Rear Admiral Shoji Nishimura led the operation from aboard the light cruiser Naka. While operating near the Sunda Strait, west of Java, the submarine Seawolf detected the Japanese invasion fleet and transmitted a contact report on March 27. Late that night, Fred Warder received coded instructions to proceed to Christmas Island and then return to an Australian port. Using diesel engines and surfacing at night to recharge the batteries, Seawolf moved at 14 knots and headed south. It remained at periscope depth during the day and surfaced just after 6 o'clock a.m. each morning. During the journey, Warder reviewed navigation charts, noting potential paths the Japanese might take to encircle the island. Early in the evening, Seawolf surfaced again after covering 190 miles that day. Lookouts spotted Christmas Island 25 miles to starboard. At midnight, Admiral Nishimura's fleet and Warder's submarine were unknowingly heading toward each other. In the early hours of March 29, Seawolf cautiously approached Christmas Island. Warder recorded in his log that he was steering various courses to pass the island to starboard, keeping 8 miles out. Despite the overcast skies, the moonlight provided excellent visibility. Warder aimed to assess if the island was still under friendly control and to identify potential Japanese landing zones. At 6:18 a.m., Seawolf reached periscope depth near the island's northwest tip. The next location of interest was Flying Fish Cove on the island's north side. Through the periscope, Warder spotted what appeared to be a partially submerged ship. He recognized its yellow smokestack and gray hull and estimated the vessel weighed about 8,000 tons. Seawolf moved to a stop around 3 miles from the cove's entrance. Warder noted there were no other ships visible in the cove and no signs of activity at the dock or settlement. Seawolf then withdrew and headed to the island's southern area. On March 30, at 2:15 p.m., a large seaplane was observed circling the island's northern region at about 1,500 feet. It was unclear whether the aircraft was friendly or enemy. It seemed to miss spotting the submerged submarine. Just before 8 o'clock p.m., after a full day underwater, Seawolf surfaced again. Warder concluded that Flying Fish Cove was the only practical landing site. Other parts of the island were unsuitable due to shallow waters, cliffs, rocks, forests, rough seas, and limited landing zones. He decided to patrol an 11-mile stretch located 61 seconds, likely meant to indicate nautical miles or minutes, off the cove's entrance. Though there were occasional brief rain squalls, moonlight lit up the night well enough for the lookouts to keep watch effectively. Warder believed the conditions were ideal to intercept any Japanese ships headed for the island. His suspicion would soon be validated. Still surfaced after recharging the batteries, Seawolf slowed to a halt just after 6:00 a.m. on March 31. The sonar operator detected enemy ships pinging somewhere off the port side. Just as Warder gave the order to dive, a searchlight suddenly illuminated from the starboard beam. Sonar now picked up pinging from all directions and the sound of ship screws moving fast. A lone Japanese warship was approaching from 3,000 yards away. Seawolf dived quickly, descending to 200 feet and starting evasive maneuvers. 2 depth charges exploded during the dive, followed by a loud series of 10 more shortly after. Luckily, the attack only lasted about 30 minutes. Just before 7:00 the next morning, Warder ordered the submarine back to periscope depth to get a look at the surface. The area was filled with Japanese ships, providing a wealth of targets. Warder scanned and identified a light cruiser 7,000 yards ahead, 2 transports 8,000 yards off the port side, and a destroyer around 6,000 yards away. Another light cruiser was a bit further to starboard. An enlisted sailor worked quickly to jot down the location and heading of each contact as Warder called them out. In total, he spotted 3 light cruisers, 4 destroyers, and 2 transports. Based on the silhouettes in his identification manual, Warder believed 2 of the light cruisers were of the Tenri class and 1 of the Jinsu class. The Japanese invasion was clearly underway. Warder decided to target the portside cruiser first. He observed that most of the Japanese ships were loitering, while the transports moved steadily toward the cove. He changed course to try to intercept one of the transports, but soon concluded it was out of reach. His attention returned to the cruisers near the cove's entrance. Warder noticed that none of the cruisers had seaplanes on their catapults, likely indicating those aircraft were supporting the landing operation elsewhere. He noted the Jinsu-class cruiser had a distinct clipper bow and a figurehead resembling a flaming sun or chrysanthemum, identifying it as the flagship due to its frequent signal exchanges. In fact, Warder had correctly identified Admiral Nishimura's flagship, the Naka. Seawolf picked up speed to get closer to the cruiser. Warder then made the decision to move slightly closer to the cove's entrance. 4 ships, 2 destroyers, and 2 cruisers were actively pinging. The Japanese seemed unable to locate the submarine. Warder described the sea surface as pleasantly rippled with occasional whitecaps, making it an ideal hiding spot for the periscope. 2 seaplanes flew overhead, and 2 distant explosions were heard just before 8:00 a.m. in order to get closer to the cove. Warder briefly took the submarine down to 120 feet before rising again to periscope depth. For the next hour, Seawolf trailed the cruiser Naka, shifting position occasionally as the ship changed course. Around 9:00 a.m., Warder decided to launch an attack. He took one last look through the periscope and slowed the submarine to 21 seconds, likely meaning knots or a related unit, calculating the target's distance and speed. Noting that it was 1,400 yards away and moving at 15 knots, the cruiser appeared to be slowly approaching, so Bill ordered the outer torpedo doors to be opened. Henry Binglin, who was responsible for firing, confirmed that everything was ready. 4 torpedoes were launched from Seawolf's front tubes in a firing sequence that lasted exactly 1 minute at 8:48 a.m. The torpedoes were aimed at the cruiser's bow, stern, foremast, and mainmast, programmed to run at a depth of 10 feet. Warder gave one last look through the periscope before diving. He later described seeing smoke from the torpedo tracks drifting across his vision and hearing men running and shouting on the cruiser's quarterdeck. The distance had closed to 700 yards. Seawolf reached top speed, turned sharply to starboard, and started descending to 120 feet. At that point, all the crew could do was wait to see if the attack was successful and prepare for the enemy's response. Order later remarked that the wait felt like a year. Before long, the crew definitely heard an explosion, and some maintained that there were two. The cruiser's propeller sound seemed to stop, but only one explosion could be confirmed. The crew believed they had hit their target, though post-war data suggested otherwise, indicating no Japanese ships were confirmed sunk or damaged in the area that day. It's likely the torpedoes malfunctioned or detonated prematurely. After a few minutes, water took Seawolf down to 200 feet due to a series of 8 explosions, which were believed to be depth charges. As he descended from the conning tower to the control room, the hatch above him was sealed tight. There were issues during the dive. He noted that the flood valve couldn't open against sea pressure. The crew switched to manual operation and eventually got it open, but they blew a gasket in the process. It wasn't a good sign ahead of what Water called a hell of a time. The sonar operator detected the sound of a fast-moving ship approaching from the starboard beam and several small, distant explosions. 5 more depth charges followed, then 7 much closer to the stern. The enemy was closing in. Over the next 71 minutes, a game of cat and mouse played out. Water lamented that every time a pump was used, the enemy would zero in on them. The trim pumps were noisy and made it hard to remain hidden. Seawolf shuddered with every explosion, paint and cork flying through the air, the lights flickering from time to time. Chief Radioman Joseph Eberg, sitting at his station, thought there was no chance of surviving a direct hit. A total of 25 depth charges were dropped, but Seawolf endured. However, the submarine began showing signs of strain. An engine lube oil cooler failed. Salt water leaked into the engine sump pumps through a faulty valve. The crew worked hard to contain the damage. 2 gyro repeaters went down. The radio transmitter malfunctioned. Valve wheels flew off in the engine room. Cable tubes in the conning tower leaked, and one of the stern torpedo tubes was taking on water. Water recalled that everyone had to carry bilge water to sanitary tanks to protect electrical equipment. The submarine eventually turned away from the Japanese ships and moved northwest. By mid-afternoon, it seemed they had shaken their pursuers, but Water remained cautious. He alternated between staying deep and rising to periscope depth. After 5:00 p.m., a scan revealed no Japanese ships nearby to the west of Christmas Island. Rain was building, and Flying Fish Cove looked covered in a squall or smoke cloud. Seawolf surfaced at 7:49 p.m. for the nightly battery charge. A deck light was found to be on fire, but was quickly unplugged and left that way for the remainder of the trip. Broken bells were also found aboard, likely a result of the depth charges. Uncertain whether Japanese forces remained nearby, Water sent out a contact report before steering the submarine eastward to approach the island's northeast point under the cover of the moon. He planned to be 10 miles east of Christmas Island by 5:00 a.m. later that night. A lookout spotted what seemed like 2 torpedo tracks approaching from starboard, prompting Seawolf to crash dive. But the sonar operator didn't detect anything, and it's likely there were no torpedoes at all. Water noted similar occurrences previously in the area. Stretches of waste material likely moved by the spring tide and northwest current. About 30 minutes before midnight, a radio transmission from headquarters arrived congratulating Seawolf on a job well done. Water said it was a big morale boost, and he attached a handwritten note praising the crew's hard work and dedication, saying they were feeling beaten down, so they posted the message on the bulletin board. He added that the sender wanted to join them on the next patrol. Just as the skipper was falling asleep, the officer of the deck reported seeing the ship about 10 miles off the island's northern coast. Through a large telescope, it was identified as a destroyer of the Asashio class. Lookouts tracked the vessel closely as Seawolf slid to a stop and began turning away. Water changed his initial strategy after later spotting a light cruiser. He had planned to strike the Japanese ships that afternoon by moving 20 miles east of the island. But with torpedoes running low, he had to reconsider. Only 1 torpedo remained forward, and it had been removed from the 2 due to an air leak losing 500 pounds of pressure per day. Water said they believed 5 torpedoes remained in good condition. Every shot would have to count, as enemy targets were still in the area. At 3:35 a.m., the silhouette of a light cruiser was spotted, causing them to scrap the afternoon attack plan. Water wrote in the log that the ship was slowly circling. The cruiser seemed unaware that Seawolf had surfaced. About 30 minutes after the initial sighting, the ship made a slow turn and began heading directly toward them at a speed of about 11 knots. At the time of sighting, the range was around 6,000 yards. Water maneuvered for a stern shot and brought the submarine to periscope depth. He determined the target was either the Notori or the Naka, as it was a light cruiser of the Notori class. Waterer spent over 30 minutes maneuvering before he was satisfied with the firing position. When the target was just 1,700 yards away, 3 torpedoes were launched from Seawolf's stern tubes in a spread pattern. The torpedoes, set to run at a depth of 10 feet, swiftly moved toward the unsuspecting cruiser. After about a minute, a tremendous explosion shook the submarine. Waterer remained at the periscope, straining to see the results in the low light. He noted the moon was veiled, making visibility difficult. He didn't see flames or the cruiser using its searchlight, but he did observe thick black smoke. Waterer believed Seawolf had inflicted damage on the Japanese invasion force near Christmas Island. The light cruiser appeared to slow down, and it seemed her propellers had stopped. The ship then disappeared from view just as sonar picked up the sound of high-speed screws. Shortly after, another light cruiser was spotted, emerging from the northeast point. This one also appeared to be a Notori-class cruiser, moving at 30 knots according to sonar. Only one torpedo was ready in the stern tubes due to an angle-setting issue with the other. Waterer decided not to engage because the target was zigzagging and couldn't be hit with the spread. 4 depth charges detonated in the distance as Waterer ordered the submarine down to 150 feet. 3 ships were pinging, according to sonar, but none were close. The dive was brief, and Seawolf soon returned to periscope depth. Waterer caught a brief glimpse of the cruiser disappearing over the horizon. No other ships were in sight, and the crew stood down from battle stations as dawn broke. For the second time in as many days, the Seawolf crew had launched a bold strike against a Japanese warship, and Waterer once again believed he had either seriously damaged or sunk a cruiser. But post-war analysis found no record of any Japanese vessel being damaged or sunk in the area at that time. For much of April 1, Seawolf trailed different targets. Waterer carefully observed the movement of float planes from 2 light cruisers and 4 destroyers that appeared intermittently. Despite his efforts, he couldn't secure a favorable attack position during the daylight hours. As he approached one ship, it would move away. He noted that Flying Fish Cove remained the hub of Japanese operations and felt frustrated that the enemy appeared to be preparing to leave, suggesting their landings had gone smoothly. Many of the Japanese warships began to sweep the area, and 2 transports started gathering speed in preparation for departure. Waterer then focused on the Naka, flagship of Admiral Nishimura. He was certain this was not the same light cruiser attacked the day before. He consulted the 1939 edition of Jane's fighting ships, noting differences in the bow structure and that some Jinsu-class cruisers lacked clipper bows. He remarked that he hadn't noticed the previous ship's figurehead, which had now become a visual distraction. As the Naka cruised with 4 destroyers in a rectangular formation, Waterer saw an opportunity to strike before the transports left. The destroyers were pinging actively, sweeping for submarines. Seawolf maneuvered her stern tubes into firing position just as the Naka made an unexpected zigzag toward her. Waterer admitted this complicated the firing setup. At 5:52 p.m., Seawolf launched her final 2 stern torpedoes. Not taking any chances with 4 destroyers nearby, Waterer ordered the submarine to turn starboard and dive to 200 feet. As Seawolf began its descent, a loud explosion echoed through the vessel, suggesting a torpedo had struck its target. Waterer believed they had hit the cruiser based on the quick sinking of the Notori that morning, and doubted such light ships could endure much damage. A Japanese ship noticed a torpedo wake heading toward the Naka and saw the cruiser make a sudden turn. One torpedo struck the starboard side of the flagship. The Japanese quickly retaliated. Seawolf, trying to slip away westward, heard secondary explosions likely caused by the initial hit. The night stretched on, and the Japanese relentlessly pursued the submarine. Crew members described the ordeal as intense and exhausting. The air became foul and humid as the air conditioning was turned off to minimize noise. Sweat dripped from machinery and men alike, and the smell worsened. Chief Pharmacist's mate Frank Lisa handed out tablets, but they had little effect. Many crew members lay silently on their bunks, waiting. At 7:00 p.m., Waterer ordered the boat to periscope depth, thinking they had evaded their pursuers since no depth charges had been dropped for about an hour. But during the ascent, a serious incident occurred. A misaligned after-trim tank caused Seawolf to suddenly surface. As the conning tower broke through the water, it created a loud splash that gave away their position. Waterer immediately ordered an emergency dive. The Japanese were right overhead, and at 7:33 p.m., the first of several depth charges exploded dangerously close. Though the next 18 charges missed their mark, Seawolf's battery was running low, and she had to escape fast. Early in the evening, the crew shut down all systems except one IC motor generator and a gyro. Waterer feared they might never resurface if the battery failed. The crew moved and spoke in hushed tones. Only one destroyer seemed to remain in the area, silently listening for the submarine. Occasionally, it released depth charges from a Y gun at low speed. Seawolf crept away slowly. Waterer later said it was only by the grace of God they escaped. He credited no skill of his own. Around 10:00 p.m., Seawolf returned to periscope depth. Though sonar picked up a ship pinging in the distance, no vessel was visible. With the crew exhausted and no torpedoes left, Waterer set course for Fremantle, Australia. Seawolf surfaced at midnight and headed west, stopping to recharge her batteries. The battle for Christmas Island had ended. On shore, the Japanese encountered no resistance as the small garrison, primarily composed of Indian soldiers, surrendered quickly. On April 4, 1942, the U.S. Navy issued a communique claiming an American submarine had sunk one Japanese light cruiser and likely damaged another near the island. Despite being struck by only one torpedo, the Naka was severely damaged. The Notori towed her back to Java, and she later made her way to Singapore for temporary repairs. After undergoing final repairs in Japan, the cruiser returned to action in 1943. But on February 18, 1944, U.S. carrier-based planes sank her near truck during the Battle of Leyte Gulf. Admiral Nishimura survived Seawolf's attack, but died later in the war. Fred Waterer and his crew showed remarkable leadership and effort, even though they didn't achieve a larger victory off Christmas Island. He completed 7 war patrols with Seawolf, and later took command of the U.S. Escalar. Defective torpedoes, a common problem early in the war, may have limited his success. Waterer eventually rose to the rank of admiral, credited post-war with sinking 6 Japanese ships. Seawolf completed 14 war patrols, sinking 27 enemy vessels and damaging 13 more, totaling over 118,000 tons sunk and nearly 70,000 tons damaged. On September 21, 1944, she left Brisbane, Australia, for her 15th patrol under the command of Lieutenant Commander Albert Bontier. After stopping at Manus Island to pick up supplies and 17 Army personnel for transport to the Philippines, Seawolf exchanged signals with the submarine Narwhal on October 3 and then disappeared. It is believed that an American destroyer escort and aircraft, hunting a Japanese submarine in the area, mistakenly sank Seawolf near Morotai Island. All 79 crew members and 17 Army passengers were lost. Seawolf remains on eternal patrol. The bravery of her crew and more than 3,300 submariners who died during the war remains undiminished.